Our fourth speaker today is Eliz Sanasarian, and she is a professor of political science at the University of Southern California, making her the exception to our all-UCLA panel today. Dr. Sanasarian has been awarded the President's Circle Faculty Award for Outstanding Merit in the areas of teaching, research, and service, and the department's 1997-98 Award for Outstanding Classroom Teaching and Dedication to Students. Her publications include Religious Minorities in Iran and the Women's Rights Movement in Iran, Mutiny, Appeasement, and Repression from 1900 to Khomeini. Her publications have appeared in edited volumes and places such as Holocaust and Genocide Studies Journal, Oxford Encyclopedia of the Modern Islamic World, Natural Resources Journal, Diaspora, and the Journal of Developing Societies. Please welcome Dr. Sanasarian.
Today there are two general trends in political science. Trend number one, which I like to really emphasize post 9/11, trend number one is a lot of policy studies. The problem with this area is when there were policy studies before 9/11, they would have some depth to them, like what's the history of the policy, how it has evolved, how it has changed. A lot of policy studies in post 9/11 are more what I like to call advocacy rather than real policy analysis, because then when you do a real policy analysis, you end it by usually concluding and saying, well, these are different scenarios. If U.S. does this and, Iraq does that, then this will happen, So that's usually your conclusion, with different alternatives that you kind of open up to your audience at the end. But that's not how most of the studies in post 9/11 are done. It's advocacy. I'll give you a couple of examples from this one work that came out, which is late 2000. This was a book published by a major research institute, very prestigious, and different people contributed to a study of different countries. The person who wrote about Iraq, for example, said the U.S. must put Iraqi leaders on notice that the U.S. will not support them indefinitely. Now, this is a very stupid comment. I mean, who will be put on notice? They were put there by the U.S. Who is going to give notice? What does giving a notice mean? It doesn't have substance to it. So that was the recommendation. The other one about Iran, for example, said Iran has more in common with the U.S. on Iraq than any other Iraqi neighbor. Therefore, U.S. should not avoid dialogue and, in fact, should have all kinds of discussion, including on nuclear issues. That's a heavy advocacy issue. How about Turkey? Turkey has a real serious border with Iraq. That's completely out of the question. No discussion of it, like persona non grata Turkey. And because this is a certain line that's being followed by this individual. You never know where the funding is coming from, who this person is connected to, but they all have PhDs and they are all political scientists. The person who wrote on Palestinian and Israelis said, we are running out of time of two-state solutions, so we should bring Hamas back into the process. For how long we've been going on with this issue of two-state solutions, then now we are running out of time, It seems that time goes on and on and on. Hamas comes in, goes out. This is not really a very practical and intelligent way of addressing a policy issue. But you see this trend, or like their conclusion said something like, we need a new policy on democratization. What's that? Like what? What does that mean? Or what's the meaning of democratization? The way do you define it? What processes are you seeing? So the dissecting is not done anymore. It just moves on to some conclusion and a point of view. The second trend is the exact opposite. The second trend is often done by political scientists who do not necessarily specialize in Middle East politics. They are international politics experts. They come from a tradition, they combine two traditions in their methodology. One is voting behavior, which is American voting behavior, and the other one is economics. The combination of these two makes them use all kinds of mathematical modeling. And so when you're reading an article or a book, all you have are these numbers. I mean, you know, it has nothing to do with how good your math is. I was great in math. And I studied with people who specialize in that area. But if I'm not up to date about the new mathematical modeling these people are doing, I don't know what they're doing. And I will not understand when I read it. The intent is to take different countries, not necessarily Middle East, but they will use a couple of countries from Middle East, maybe 2, 3 from Latin America, 4 or 5 from Africa, and other parts. They will just throw them all together. Do their kinds of what I like to call mathematical acrobatics, depending on what fits the situation. And then they come up with a conclusion. They claim with their conclusion, which is often nothing earth-shattering, they will conclude that, well, you see, you can predict that Mubarak would step down. You can predict it by using this model, because dictators will never last forever. Of course. Right. Or like a very famous article in the American Political Science Association journal did mathematical modeling of some sort with, I think it was like over 100 countries, and they were very proud. The conclusion was countries that have civil war often have populations that are very unhappy and governments that are unstable. Now, if I was talking to Ahmad in an Egyptian village, he could have told me that without going through all this. They're often getting a lot of money from U.S. government to do this kind of study. There are a lot of grants that are not often directed to this kind of analysis. The positive thing about it, trying to be objective, is that you're trying to use different parts from different regions to see patterns. The problem is that they are too stuck on their mathematical modeling, and they are too rigid, and they lack substance and theory and concepts. So there's nothing behind it. So whatever numbers they have dictates whatever conclusions they will have. And they never think twice that the conclusion is not deep. And these are often people who have no background in history, they have no background in philosophy, they know nothing about political theory, political philosophy. My father's best friend was a very famous mathematician, University of Iowa. His knowledge of Greek philosophy and political philosophy was unbelievable, and he would connect mathematics to that philosophy. These days, they don't do that at all. They don't think it's important. They don't think none of it is necessary. Now, there is one positive trend that I like very much, and that is political scientists who do studies on specific issues, very specific, very focused, and use different historical and anthropological approaches to do it, do field work, are doing a good job. Many of them that I've noticed and I've done reviews are not Americans. They are Australians, Norwegians, of other nationalities who've done fantastic work, or they are of Middle Eastern background themselves. They understand numbers, they may use it a little bit, but they don't get carried away with it. I reviewed several of them in the Perspectives on Politics, which is one of our top journals, and I don't review books unless I like them, by the way. Don't want bad karma. So there is this book by Janine Clark called Islam, Charity, and Activism, which is a case study of Egypt. And she shows that how these hospitals that are operating in the poor areas, how they are functioning, and how, in fact, you really do not have intense religious bias, even though Islamists are running it, and what's the dynamic of it. That kind of a study is a very useful study. Those are the ones that I found to be the best and the strongest coming out of political science.